Welcome in, everyone. I am David Gow, the boss. Next to me, Carla Dawson, the gloss. We got the old radio dog, Craig Larson, behind the glass. Carla, welcome in.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a good Monday.
It's a good Monday, and it's a good Monday to talk to you because you were there at the center of the universe. The Texans' big win last night over the Bears. On site, you were in the owner's box for a little while. You were roaming
On the
halls.
field.
On the field. Tell us about the experience. Was it electric? The big primetime Sunday night matchup. A rare event for the Texans. It's been a long, long time.
It's been 5 years since December of 19. We did beat the Patriots, but it was like December 2nd of 19. And now we're going to have 6, primetime or nationally televised games this year. Like we had 0 last year.
Well, and
0 primetime.
Totally warranted to be now on the center stage as they are. They are 2-0 in a league that doesn't have a lot of undefeated teams anymore.
9 2-0 teams right now in the NFL.
Yes.
That's it. And I have to say, no one's 2-0 that I'm looking at is very pretty. And that includes the Chiefs.
No.
I don't see any pretty 2-0. This is why I said, David, I'm going to double down on what we talked about last week, which is due to the shortened preseason and basically a preseason that is pretty irrelevant, especially for starters. I'm not going to do any microwave analysis until that is meaningful, really knowledgeable, that makes sense until week 3. And I think we saw it this week.
That's an entirely logical and rational statement. Unfortunately, sports talk is rarely logical and rational.
Well, that's right. That's why we're doing what we do.
Right. There's just so much uncertainty still in the development of these teams. And you're right. Even the Chiefs, who probably, by everyone's argument, would be the best 2-0 team in the league right now, they could easily be 0-2.
Oh, it was a coin flip. It was a toe on the line week 1, should have had white cleats. And then it was a DPI, and it could be a questionable DPI. Who knows what it was? But I thought if you look at week 1 and who were the heavy favorites and going into the week and coming out of the week, your Cowboys, the 49ers, the Ravens, the Colts looked amazing with Anthony Richardson, and Detroit. Okay, look at all of them this week.
Those are all supposed to be elite teams in the league, and they're all sitting there at 1-1.
Yes, and so this week, our week 2 reality after week 1, Las Vegas takes it to Baltimore. At Baltimore, New Orleans handed Dallas, I'm so sorry, like one of the franchise's worst loss. Minnesota steamrolled San Francisco, which sacked Brock Purdy 6 times, and Tampa Bay took it to Detroit without much of a running game or anything. Like, look what 1 week has done. Taken our heavy favorites that looked amazing and flipped it.
Flipped it out.
What the heck?
Well, one team we know is doing well and off to a good start are the hometown Houston Texans. What was the environment like in the stadium when you were there? You said there were a lot of Bear fans in attendance.
It was super interesting. It was electric. And, Slim Thug was at halftime, and we had all these cool light bracelets and all this kind of stuff. I have to say, I think the Bear fans outdid the Texans fans, and I'm bummed to say that. It's like we've gotten with a year of CJ and D'Amico under our belts, it's almost like we got a little complacent. It was insane.
That, just stepping back from it, that's really hard for me to grasp for 2 reasons. One is, the Bears, that's a long travel, right? Chicago's not next door. It's not like we're talking about Dallas to Houston, but sure, it's a quick Southwest flight down to Houston. But then secondly, yes, this is only year 2, and this is a Sunday night marquee matchup. I would have thought the Texans fans would have died to turn out for that game.
And they did. There were a lot of Texans fans, but I was surrounded by Bears fans. It was really fascinating.
Well, that was just their good fortune that they got to be near the gloss.
But, it's very hard when you're so... I was so nervous about this game. I was very nervous about it.
What made you nervous coming in? Because I actually thought this was going to be a somewhat easy win over a rookie quarterback playing at home. But there were concerns coming to this game.
And just what you said is exactly why I was nervous. That's how everybody felt.
Yeah.
Every talking head, Las Vegas, everything. Was this going to be a run over? No questions. And I thought, no, you know what? While the Texans pulled out a gritty win against what was looking like a really strong Indianapolis Colts team, it wasn't super pretty. And I think, what I'm really realizing, David, is that CJ Stroud is an anomaly because his numbers yesterday and week 1, they were good. They're not MVP numbers. But if you really, really dig down into it, they're so efficient. And I really credit Bobby Slowick's game plan and CJ's work because you know what happened last year? Nobody expected CJ Stroud to look like he looked. Nobody expected a 4-win Texans team to go 2 rounds into the playoffs. And so and there was no book on him, no NFL book on him. So everything was a surprise last year. Now these defenses know what he's like. They know his tendencies and they know that the Texans are strong. They didn't even know who Tank Dell was. Well, you think they were
True.
worried about a small little guy out of University of Houston? And he's one of our strongest weapons. And so I think now I really credit Bobby Slowick to realize I still have a young quarterback. Yes, he is light years ahead of the Bryce Youngs and really pretty much any other rookie that had to start. But I have to game plan efficiency for him and keep his confidence up. And guess what? They're still winning games. Because if you think about Tom Brady, you think about Aaron Rodgers, you think these people did not, Patrick Mahomes, they didn't start as rookies. They were drafted and they sat behind really good quarterbacks. I think it is a lot to ask a rookie, i.e., Caleb Williams, to come in and save the franchise. And CJ is a rare case that he was able to do it. So when I see people like my husband sitting next to him last night, he's like, CJ's having a terrible game. I said, don't go there. I don't think so. Like, let me look into this when we get home. I want to see the numbers and look into it. And I really credit Bobby Slowick. We've got a genius as an OC, and CJ is very, very efficient.
Well, CJ's stats were decent. They won't.
Not going to pop off the page.
No, they're not. He was 23 for 36. He threw for 260 yards. Average completion was 7.2 yards and an overall rating of 94.7. That's a pretty good day for most quarterbacks in the NFL. It's funny because our expectations for what CJ is going to do week in and week out are rising every week. One guy who is, to me, just growing before our eyes is Nico Collins.
Oh my, he literally growing, like physically. He has bulked up like that guy. He had a really unfortunate unsportsmanlike conduct penalty last night, but he made up for it right away and scored on a 28-yard pass from CJ. But
Nico with 8 receptions for 135 yards.
I mean, what a day.
He makes it look easy, and you can tell there's a great chemistry between CJ Stroud and Nico Collins.
Yes. And that chemistry needs to be worked out with Stefon Diggs for sure, because I don't think the Texans are using him as they should. He only had 4 receptions last night. Now, he did average over 9 yards a catch, but I think they could do more. But no, you're right about that. And I think, when you look at when you look at the numbers, to look for all quarterbacks, to look at their efficiency, because I looked at Jared Goff's numbers yesterday. I was like, 307 yards. Well, he had some interceptions and he was like 34 for 55. So if I look at just the raw numbers, it looked like he could run circles around CJ. He was not efficient at all. And it cost them the game, honestly. And I think efficiency and realizing we're still developing a young quarterback and patience is hard and they're still winning.
Well, and I will say that, to be sure, I'm sure CJ Stroud's going to be a better quarterback 2 years from now than he is today. Development is key, and he's on his way. But right now, if I had a big game tomorrow, would I rather have CJ Stroud or Jared Goff as my quarterback? I would absolutely go CJ Stroud. This is a topic for later on in the show, but I really think the Lions have been way overrated. It was interesting. Sports Illustrated had them as one of the 2 or 3 teams that really need to be watched to go to the Super Bowl. I think that's very aggressive.
That's a dangerous moniker to put on someone this early.
Yeah. No, it's too much, too fast for those Lions. And I'm not sure that Dan Campbell is a Super Bowl coach yet. Lots to unpack there. But what we're seeing from the Texans is CJ Stroud has matured way ahead of his time. And it really was interesting to contrast that with, there you see probably one of the most touted rookies in a long time, Caleb Williams, come in. I liked what I saw from Caleb Williams,
especially that first drive. He was 5 for 5.
Look,
he looked unstoppable.
He is a rookie. He is a second game starter here, and in some sense, some of these guys shouldn't be out on the field as rookies playing quarterback, and that's certainly true of Bryce Young last year. But Caleb Williams, I thought, looked the part. You could see why people were so excited about him. His arm strength, his arm talent is off the charts. His ability to run the ball is really, really good. He's an extraordinary physical talent. How that will translate to a mature, seasoned quarterback who makes great decisions on the fly, we shall see. But I saw a lot in Caleb Williams that I thought was impressive.
He is impressive, and I think what is not impressive is Chicago's O-line. And where was the run game? Everything depended on him, and he had no protection. Last night, 7 sacks, 11 QB hits, and 2 turnovers. That guy looked, his face was red.
Yeah.
I mean, and I could see it from where I was sitting. He got so beat up. It was like that O-line was opening doors for our defense. Now, the Texans have a fantastic defense, an unbelievable
That was the
defense.
thing I wanted to ask you. I really
Yeah.
couldn't tell. Was it that the Texans' defensive front is so good, or the Bears' offensive line is really not very good? Probably some combination thereof, but it was hard for me to say.
Well, if you looked at the first drive of Chicago's, you were like, "Oh man, everyone's doing a great job." But I would say 2 things. Yes, I think the Texans defense is incredible. Chicago's defense is incredible. But that O-line is completely porous, and I'm going to say that this is not nice, but offensive coordinator Shane Waldron for the Bears, he's called a suspect game for the 2nd week in a row. He is not putting Caleb in the best spot that he can. He should be calling a lot more run plays. I didn't like the game that he called, and I think, Shane, if I can give you any advice, and if you would listen to a girl, go talk to Bobby Slowick and find out how not to ruin a rookie quarterback. This guy is the number 1 pick in the draft for a reason. Caleb Williams is an unbelievable talent, and you're a number 1 draft pick because you're going to a team that's been really terrible. So know that going in, that you don't have a good offensive plan for him. Get the right guy. I'm not sure that Shane Waldron is the one. I hope so, but he's got to learn.
Intriguing to see all things develop. And you're right, this point about Stroud is on his way to greatness, thanks in part to good coaching. Caleb Williams needs to get some good coaching there
Yes,
from
he does.
Chicago. They've got a long way to go. All right, when we come back, we're going to look at next week's matchup because the Texans will have a much tougher time facing the Vikings. This Vikings team looked very good yesterday. Texans got to go on the road. It'll be an interesting matchup. We'll look at what will the Texans need to do differently next week to ensure they go 3-0. That up here next year on ESPN Radio 97.5 and 92.5.
You're listening to The Boss
and The Gloss.
On ESPN 97.5 and 92.5.
Presented by Tony's. Tony's Restaurant, the city's top fine dining experience.
From the Veritex Community Bank Studios, here's David Gow.
And Carla Dawson.
Welcome back. We are reveling in a Texans team that has 2 wins and no losses. A big victory over the Bears yesterday. And now they face a bigger hurdle. I mean, the Vikings actually looked very, very good.
They're one of the 9 2-0 teams along with the Texans.
And nobody would have seen that coming, frankly. I mean, look, they didn't even think that Sam Darnold would be their starting quarterback. But I might posit this. At this moment, that Sam Darnold is more likely to win a game for them than their highly touted quarterback they drafted, McCarthy. I just know that McCarthy needs some time to season, get himself ready. We talked about the challenges of starting.
Well, he's out with his knee injury.
Rookies.
He'll miss the whole season.
Yeah, he's out. Yeah. So he's out with injury, and it gives Sam Darnold a chance. And Sam Darnold's just ready to play, much more so now than McCarthy is.
Absolutely. And honestly, this is a gift for McCarthy, and it's a gift for Darnold. It's kind of a win-win for both of them, honestly, because for the first time, Sam Darnold is only 27 years old. And obviously, he was drafted by the Jets, where quarterbacks go to die. So that was, and remember his famous, "I'm seeing ghosts." I mean, it was terrible.
I never really understood that quote, but I'll go with you on it.
Yes. And that just meant I am not, nothing is translating, terrible. And then he went to Carolina. I mean, he might have had other stops behind Baker Mayfield. I mean, he's been in pitiful situations, like situations that aren't going to help him develop as a quarterback. And really, I felt sad about him. He went to my alma mater, USC, and he was such an unflappable, very much a CJ type of unflappable personality, just no emotion, just go out there and just do it. No fear, until he saw ghosts in the Jets. For the first time, here he is, first time since the Jets, but I don't count that because, as I said, so quarterbacks go to die. This is his team. He's not backing up anybody right now. He's not coming in for Baker Mayfield's garbage time. Like when Baker Mayfield got let go in Carolina, it was like, okay, Sam, help us. Well, they're helpless. So for once, he's with a franchise that's well coached and has great personnel. Justin Jefferson signed in the offseason. Now he's out right now. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but this is finally his. And I think that's got to make a difference in how Sam Darnold is performing and how he's approaching the game. This is Darnold's team.
I actually think your statement that it's a favor to McCarthy is sort of interesting. But
Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes.
I tend to agree with it. And because the alternative, well, we can go down a whole litany of highly drafted, highly touted collegiate quarterbacks who came into the NFL and just got beat up. Bryce Young being the poster child today, as it was announced that the Panthers are going to bench him after 2 games into this season.
Sad.
But go down the list. I mean, Mac Jones, we can go back to David Carr. I mean, it just doesn't matter. There's so many of these guys who when they're drafted that high, and particularly at the quarterback position, there's such pressure to put them in, and most of the time they're just not ready. And there's Sam Darnold. He probably was a victim of that same logic, starting too early, getting beaten up, but it's a second life type an opportunity for him. And when I think about it, there have been these second life quarterbacks, guys who went.
Look at Geno Smith, like right now.
Geno Smith is a second life quarterback. We'll see Baker Mayfield for the moment. He's got a team 2-0.
Yeah,
he's having a second life. Sam Darnold's having a second life. It's great to see. You know what the funny thing, I had this flashback, and most of our audience are probably too young to remember, but the best version of a second life, maybe even third life quarterback, was Jim Plunkett.
Oh my gosh. You know, he was my childhood idol.
Well, think about his career. He was a flop with his first team.
Yes,
and then he went on and won Super Bowls with the Raiders.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a legend.
But Sam Darnold now, this is his time. And I tell you what, I was impressed by a couple things. Certainly his play, but maybe even more so the Vikings defense and its ability to shut down the 49ers offense. Now, I know that the 49ers did not have Christian McCaffrey, and McCaffrey is a unique weapon in this league.
He's a utility knife.
He's special.
He's special.
He really is.
But they didn't have him last week either.
And they have another good running back and a whole bunch of weapons on that offense. I mean, I just thought, if you had told me coming to that game, well, McCaffrey can't play, but you've got the 49ers and all their talent facing the Vikings.
It's an embarrassment of riches on that roster.
That's right. I surely thought the 49ers would not have so much trouble with the Vikings defense.
No, I agree with you. And you look at that bomb to Justin Jefferson that Darnold threw out of the end zone. Do you know how hard that is? You do know, because you've played quarterback. It is very hard to throw. That throw was over 60 yards out of the end zone. I'm sorry. And it ended up being a 97-yard touchdown run by Jefferson before he had to go out.
Well, it's an outstanding throw. And of course, it is hard to take a deep shot out of the end zone because you're afraid of getting a safety. But from the quarterback's perspective, throwing the football, to throw the ball that far downfield, you've got to get your feet set. You've got to be able to step into the ball. And it's very easy when you're standing in the end zone and the rush is coming to get jittery. And if you've got jittery feet, you're not going to be able to launch the ball as deeply as he did. And he made a perfect throw. Justin Jefferson, of course, is one of the elite guys on the field. It was an amazing play and a big turning point, because think about the emotional swing when you've got a team all the way backed up in their own end zone and then they can convert it for 7.
I mean, it was truly remarkable. You're right. I love the way that you said it. Sam Darnold has a new lease on life. This is his own team. And when you can play complementary football and you have a team that all 3 phases are great, credit Brian Flores. He also has a new life being the DC here in Minnesota, and he called an amazing game.
He did. Of course, wow. He left Miami in a bit of a dust storm, and Tua.
And guess what? There's another dust storm in Miami right now.
Yeah, Tua made some negative comments about having to play for Flores. Flores being sort of a negative, heavy-handed coach was sort of how Tua felt about it. Tua's comments, of course, saying that it's really hard to play when your coach doesn't believe in you. Well, Flores believes in that Vikings defense, and that Vikings defense
6 sacks on Purdy. 6 sacks.
I can't remember watching a 49ers quarterback get sacked 6 times like that. The way that offense is run, it's always a run first. They're doing off play action. They really don't expose the quarterback very much.
No.
It's one of the great
Which
things
is why
about that offense.
Mr. Irrelevant is able to succeed in that system.
Well, Flores figured it out. I mean, what was interesting is, yes, in the end, Brock Purdy had 319 yards passing. Jordan Mason rushed for 100 yards. But a lot of that came in catch-up mode. It came later. This was not a good performance by the 49ers offense. Really surprising to see them out of sync.
Well, I'm going to stick with my theme of the day of efficiency and how important it is to look at efficiency. Because we talked about in the last segment, we looked at CJ Stroud's numbers versus like a Jared Goff. Jared Goff's numbers were over 300 yards yesterday. He was so inefficient and he lost the game. CJ's numbers were pedestrian-ish and he won the game and he was so efficient. Darnold, 17 of 26 for 268 yards and 2 TDs. Those are very efficient numbers and they're good. Are they great? No, they're very good though. You look at Brock Purdy, if you looked at 319 yards, he was very inefficient.
Yes.
So I think that's going to be my word of the season. Efficiency.
Efficiency. You like it. Okay.
I like
the Texans face this Vikings team. The 2 teams come in with records of 2-0. They're both off to great starts. What do you really want to see the Texans do maybe differently from what you saw last night with the Bears?
Oh, number 1. Okay, janitors, get your freaking cleanup brooms out. What the H with 112 yards of penalties?
Yeah, can't do that.
David, it was insane last night. At one point, I looked at my friend next to me. I said, why don't we get a t-shirt gun and just start shooting out bright yellow t-shirts onto the field? Because no one would know. I think the roof was open because it was raining penalty flags. Shut the damn roof. It was insane. And I don't know. And I want to ask, we're going to get to talk to Chancellor Johnson coming up in the next segment. I really want to ask him because it was both sides of the balls, mainly the Texans. The Texans had fewer penalties, but more punitive. They had a lot of 15-yard things. It was so insane. There was no rhythm to the game. So I would say, number 1, we know Tunsil's going to get his 2 to 4 false starts because for some reason he must have that gas mask on, smoking his I don't know what before he does that because he does it every darn week.
No, he gave that up, I thought.
Oh, my gosh. Stop the false starts. And then Titus Howard had one the last drive that was super costly. I mean, geez. So I would say that is number 1. Disciplined football. You've got to cut down. That is a touchdown and an 1/8 of penalties. What in the world? I mean, a field and 1/8 of penalties. What do you think?
No, clearly they've got to do that.
It's
I'd love to
awful.
see them run the ball better. They weren't very productive running the ball yesterday.
Yeah, they lost Mixon, so
and
he's
losing
getting an
Mixon
MRI.
is a big thing. I mean, look, we were spoiled by week 1 when Mixon ran for
We knew that wasn't
150
going to happen
yards.
again.
And I'd love to see them run the ball better, and that makes everything else much easier on CJ and the rest of the
Yes.
offense. I'd love to see them utilize more of their weapons. I mean, just they've got so much
Stephon,
talent.
come on.
It was harder to get a rhythm, as you said. Once you get penalties and you get in a hole, it's hard to dig out of those holes. You don't get to run as many plays out of your playbook. You have shorter drives. It all just builds on itself. They've got to clean those things up, and I think they can get themselves back on track.
I mean, as a Cradle Raider fan, I am used to having games that have penalties that have no rhythm. I'm not used to that with the Texans.
Mm-hmm.
That was really insane.
All right, in just a minute, we're going to be joined by Chancellor Jones. He is, of course, with Channel 2, KPRC here in Houston, and he is going to feed us all things what he saw. Chancellor Johnson from KPRC Channel 2 will tell us all things about what he saw from the Texans. That will be up next. We'll be returning to you live here with ESPN Radio 97.5 and 92.5. All right, before anybody gets too excited about where they're going to have dinner tonight,
Okay, because I'm hungry already.
I'm telling you where you need to go tomorrow night.
Okay, give it to me.
Tony's Restaurant in Greenway Plaza is not open on Mondays, but it's open every other day for lunch and dinner, and it is the absolute best in the city.
Are you treating?
I will treat you, Carla.
Yes.
And,
All right.
and we got the old radio dog behind the glass. He's jumping
All
up
right,
and down.
Craig. Yeah, he's ready.
Looking
Look
for
at
those
him.
big bowls of pasta, heavy on delicious sauce. And let me tell you, the pasta dishes at Tony's are the best. What I usually do is I order a tuna dish with a delightful sauce and some tuna. It's a pasta with tuna on top. It's absolutely the best in the city. I highly recommend it. You get that with a martini, and really, there's nothing else you need in
well,
life.
now we're talking.
Now we're talking.
But I can't be a day drinker. That would not. Can you imagine this as a day drinker? Oh, Lord.
No, we keep coffee and alcohol away from the
Yes,
glass. It's best that way.
Absolutely. It is best.
All right, so get to Tony's Fine Dining. It is the best fine dining experience. It's in Greenway Plaza, open Tuesdays through Sundays. And we will be right back here on ESPN Radio.
This is The Boss
And the Gloss.
on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5.
Presented by Tony's. Tony's Restaurant, the city's top fine dining experience.
From the Veritex Community Bank Studios, here's David Gow.
And Carla Dawson.
Welcome back. You are listening to ESPN Radio 97.5 and 92.5. And I'm delighted to tell you that we're going to be joined now by KPRC's Chancellor Johnson. He is an Emmy Award-winning sports reporter for Channel 2 here in town. Chancellor, thanks so much for joining us. You're on with David and Carla.
Hey, absolutely. Thanks, guys, for having me on the show.
Well, tell us, you were at the game last night. What are your observations of the local Houston Texans sitting at 2-0 with an outstanding record, one of the few teams still undefeated?
Yeah, you talk about the Houston Texans coming into this season. Obviously, they had such high expectations, and so far, 2 games up, 2 games down, and they are undefeated on the year. And they've really been able to do it in a couple of different ways to start the year. Early on, I think we really expected this offense with all the talent on this team. Earlier in the offseason, being at training camp, C.J. Stroud called his weapons a five-headed monster. But so far, to me, what stood out in these 2 games is the defense. Look at yesterday how they had 7 sacks on rookie QB Caleb Williams. They forced two takeaways as well, and they also had a takeaway in their first game on the road at Indianapolis. And so even yesterday at post game, D'Amico Ryan said the player of the game was Kaimi Fairbairn. So not offensively have they been getting it done, but more so on defense. And so I think the offense still continue to find themselves over the course of the season. I think they're still a really dangerous offensive unit, but so far defensively they've been able to get it done and through their special teams. And so I know some Texans fans aren't happy with the way maybe they've won the first 2 games. I think they wanted a little bit more from their team, but 2-0 is still 2-0, and something that no other team in the AFC South can say, as those other teams are still searching for their first win on the season.
I love that, Chancellor. And my word, I was just telling David, of the season is efficiency. And I would say for those sports fans that are saying, but what happened to our CJ and why isn't this looking sexier and all of this? The bottom line is he is efficient. His line is efficient. And Bobby Sloag is calling games that put him in good positions, because now all these teams have a book on him. These defenses know what he's about. So he's taking care of the football. It's his 7th straight start yesterday with no interceptions. Let me ask you this, Chancellor. So the offseason acquisitions of Stephon Diggs out of Buffalo, Joe Mixon out of Cincinnati, these are guys that played for teams that went deep into the playoffs, Cincinnati all the way to the Super Bowl. I've got to believe that is incredible veteran leadership and expectation on this team. Yesterday in particular, Stephon didn't get a lot of use. Tell me your thoughts just on the whole thing, bringing these guys in, not only what they bring to the team, on the field, but with that experience of going deep into the playoffs year after year with their former teams.
Yeah, the veteran leadership has really helped out this Houston Texans team through the beginning of the season and really throughout the offseason. Obviously, when you bring in a guy like, we'll start with Stephon Diggs, right? Stephon Diggs obviously has a perception around him around the league. There's,
Sure.
People have called him a diva or whatever they said about him, I guess, off the field. But on the field, with his body of work, his resume speaks for itself. And so, it's funny. Nico Collins is talking about how he used to watch him in high school. So now he's really the veteran in the room. And so he's such a dynamic talent. And we saw that on full display in week 1, Indianapolis, where he went off for 2 touchdowns. And so really not just Stephon Diggs, also Joe Mixon running for 159 yards in that season opener against the Colts, really getting it done on the ground. And so, as you just mentioned, that experience is invaluable. And it's been really interesting to me to see how Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs have clicked together as newcomers on the team. It was funny last week, leading up to the game on Sunday night, Joe Mixon said, both Steph and I have reservations, and we don't want to be late. And reservations to get to the Super Bowl, once again, for Joe Mixon, it would be Stephon Diggs' first time, and ultimately help lead this Houston Texans team to the Super Bowl. Obviously, a long, long way to go until we get to that point. It's only week 2, but they really brought not just the talent on the field, but also a dynamic leadership off of it. I think Stephon Diggs has a handshake with everybody on this team.
I saw that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And a different one.
And to mention, yeah, and they're all different. And it's interesting to know, too, of course, Stephon Diggs was voted as one of the captains. And I want to be clear on that. He was voted. That's something that has to be earned by his teammates in the locker room, and he's certainly done that so far through the first couple of games through the season.
We're talking to Chancellor Johnson. You can watch him on Channel 2 KPRC, and we've enjoyed your segment with Pep Hamilton each week and breaking down the game. It's always great to get those insights. Want to ask you, Chancellor, the challenge next week, the Vikings, they're certainly a more formidable opponent than the Bears at this point, and the Vikings are coming off a great win over the 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
What are you
Absolutely.
worried? What concerns you about the Vikings going on the road and facing that team?
What concerns me about the Vikings is their defense, led by Brian Flores, who is one of the more dynamic and better defensive play callers in the league. He had that reputation even in his days as a head coach when he was with the Miami Dolphins. And what he's been able to do in Minnesota has been really, really impressive. And of course, offensively, they're led by Justin Jefferson. They also brought in Aaron Jones, who's been one of the better running backs in this league for years. It's weird for me because actually I covered Aaron when I was in Green Bay. Yeah, I covered him while I was in Green Bay, so I'm still getting used to seeing him in purple. That's just weird to me. Seeing him go from Green Bay to Minnesota, but he's also provided a nice spark for that offense. And of course, like I said, Justin Jefferson, by my money, he's the best wide receiver in this league, and we saw that. But actually, yesterday we broke off over a 90-yard touchdown pass. He actually got banged up, so we'll see if he'll play. But if he does, he's, to me, one of the best weapons in the entire league. But going back to Brian Flores, what they were able to do, beating the San Francisco 49ers. And remember, the 49ers and the Texans run similar schemes. Bobby Slowick and D'Amico Ryans come from that same Shanahan tree. And so they had a lot of success, the Vikings did, against that 49ers offense. Really what many people will call an upset yesterday. And so the Texans have to be wary of that. Now, they got the win yesterday on Sunday night against the Chicago Bears, but they were really sloppy in that win. Too many penalties. They had 12 on the day. Offensively, they couldn't really get things going, especially once Joe Mixon went out. The second half, they really struggled. And that trend continues. Minnesota is one of the tough places to play. You're going to hear that skull clap throughout the entire ball game. It's a tough environment, so they really have to be on their A game. They will suffer their first loss of the season.
Chancellor, you mentioned the penalties. I was there at the game yesterday too, and it was. I told David I think the roof was open because they were raining penalty flags. I've never seen anything like it, and I grew up a Raiders fan, so this was so frustrating. Do you feel like, 112 yards of penalties for the Texans? I can't remember a game like that. Do you think that is? Do you think it was the officiating was excessive last night? Honestly, on both sides of the ball, because Chicago had plenty, just not as much yardage. Or do you think it was just really undisciplined football by both the Bears and the Texans? What was your take?
To me, I think it was undisciplined football by both teams. And for the Houston Texans, to me, the false starts in critical situations, that's something that's plagued them even going back to last year. That can't happen because we're talking about a team that we expect to potentially go to the Super Bowl. And you can't have those mistakes if you hope to win a championship. And so Larry Thompson got caught in it.
Again.
He's been a guy who struggled with that, but he's not a guy who struggled in pass protection. So that's why I think a lot of people look past Larry Thompson's false starts.
Right.
He's so excellent. Well, when the ball is snapped, Kenyon Green, as good as he's really been these first two games, he also struggled with that as well. We had to saw a couple of holding calls. Jalen Petrie got stuck on a PI call. Kalen Bullock as well. There's something that I expect D'Amico Ryans, the type of coach that he is, for him to get his team right. He talked about after the game. A win is a win. It's a lot easier to correct those mistakes in a win, but he knows that's something that has to be cleaned up. And once again, something they can't afford to do in a tough environment on the road next week.
We are talking to Chancellor Johnson. You can watch him on Channel 2 KPRC. He's their sports reporter there. Chancellor, I'd love to shift gears with you for just a minute and talk a little Longhorn football. It seemed like a week ago, Quinn Ewers was on his way to a Heisman Trophy. And then the narrative this week
What a difference a day makes.
Is he really going to be a starter anymore? There's a lot of overreaction.
Whoa, Microwave Monday. Let's bring it.
But I've seen the headlines. We've all seen them. Manning may now step in for good. You've seen them all. What's your take on the quarterback situation? And the Longhorns now sitting number 1 overall in the rankings.
First time since 2008.
Absolutely. My take on that is it's a fun story because Arch Manning is the most famous college backup maybe ever. Maybe
ever.
But this team isn't going to win a national title without Quinn Ewers. He's the guy who really makes this offense go with all the dynamic weapons they have on that team. I haven't seen – this is the most impressive talent that I've seen, or impressive roster I've seen with the Longhorns really in a very, very long time. The good old question is, Texas back? And I would say so. I think that as of right now, Arch Manning can give them what they need to get through, hopefully maybe a week or two of missing Quinn Ewers. But once again, if they want to win an SEC title, if they want to win a national title, I believe Quinn Ewers has to be the man back there. But it is nice to have a guy that you can trust, a guy that clearly has the talent to hold you over and continue to grow and develop and take over the reins once Quinn Ewers leaves. But to me, Quinn Ewers is still the guy, and everything else is, to me, is just noise. I imagine Steve Sarkisian is sitting in his office laughing, seeing any of those headlines, because he knows when Quinn Ewers is healthy, he is my QB1, and there's really nothing else to really talk about as of right now.
Well, Chancellor, I think it's really good that you brought that on down because honestly, Ewers went out in the first quarter against UTSA, and I know Jeff Traylor has done a great job there, but it's still UTSA. They already had a 14-point lead and were about to score again. So honestly, while Manning was impressive and had great poise, and he's faster than fast, 56-7 is a typical score that UT should put on UTSA. And next weekend they're going to have Louisiana Monroe, so they don't have to rush Ewers back. So I think it's a little bit of, okay, hold on back, Longhorn fans. Like, Arch isn't going to steal Ewers' job, but how lucky for you that this is who is in waiting, and you've got this situation where he's able to get meaningful minutes.
I agree, and like I said, I think he's the guy. It's not situations like what you see in Florida, right? Where I think DJ Lagway should be the starter over Graham Mertz.
Yeah,
But to me, this is not that. I think Quinn Ewers is the guy, and as you just mentioned, fortunately they have a easier opponent this week, and then the following week when they start their SEC play, it's Mississippi State, a team that actually lost to my Arizona State Sun Devils. I'm so happy to say that we're 3-0 right now. Forks up. We're living really pretty right now. I know since we're on the subject, we should be ranked, but that's a topic for another day.
Exactly.
But on a serious note, though, once again, Quinn Ewers is the guy. And I unfortunately for the Longhorns, this doesn't seem to be a long-term injury, and he should be back. And right now, with the 12-team playoff, they have a little wiggle room if they are to drop a game. Hopefully, it's not against one of the next two teams that they play. If it is some, if Ewers misses some time and it comes down to maybe a tougher opponent. Right now they have a little wiggle room, but when Ewers is back, I expect that the Longhorns continue in this upward trend and be number one for a few weeks moving forward.
All right, he is Emmy Award-winning sports reporter Chancellor Johnson. You can see him on KPRC Channel 2. Chancellor, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insights.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on the show, guys.
Thank you, Chancellor.
All right, when we come back, we're going to get a chance to visit with Dave Kaplan. He is with ESPN Radio in Chicago. So we'll get the Bears' perspective from the losing end. That'll be Dave Kaplan up next here on ESPN Radio 97.5, 92.5.
You're listening to The Boss
and the Gloss.
on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5.
Presented by Tony's. Tony's Restaurant, the city's top fine dining experience.
From the Veritex Community Bank Studios, here's David Gow.
And Carla Dawson.
Welcome back, and we are delighted to bring into our show here Dave Kaplan. He is with ESPN Radio in Chicago. Dave, welcome to the show. You're on with David and Carla.
David and Carla, it's an honor to be on with you guys. I know we're down in Houston, and that is where it didn't go as I had hoped for my Chicago Bears. They had a chance, but didn't get it done.
And you brought the city with you, too.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, yes. So
Say
we
that
were
again?
commenting, the turnout of Chicago Bear fans down here in Houston was really
Insane.
impressive.
We have one of the best fan bases in terms of how they travel and how they support this team, and it's not as though we've had all these championship seasons and all these playoff appearances. It's been more hoping someday we can be one of those really good, consistent, sustained success type franchises, and we haven't. But finally, with Caleb Williams there and Odunze and Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, and you keep adding all these names up, it's going to get better. Now, they got to fix their blocking issues. That's the problem.
Well, it was indeed. I mean, 7 quarterback sacks. It looked at times like Caleb Williams is running for his life. What can they do to shore things up around him? They also really could get back to running the ball a bit better, right? I mean, last year they ran the ball pretty well, did they not?
They did run the ball well, and why they're not running it reasonably well through 2 weeks, I can't begin to tell you. It's a new offensive coordinator,
Shane
same
Waldron.
offensive line coach. So why they can't get a little bit downhill now? Last night they're on, running silent count, and that means your tackles are going to probably get off a click late off the ball because they can't hear the quarterback because there is no count because it's so loud in that building. Credit to the fans. And so you're going to try and run a stretch play or run somebody around the end, and you're going up against Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter, two studs, and your tackles are a click late getting off the ball. One is a okay player, Braxton Jones on the left, and on the right, the guy playing his second game of his second season in Darnell Wright. So we've had some issues there, and then up the middle, Coleman Shelton. Look, you get what you pay for. If you go to let's call it CarMax. You guys have CarMax down there?
We do.
Yes.
Okay, you go to the CarMax, you go, my budget's $8,500. You get a car, it gets you to the mall, it gets you to the grocery store, but you don't pull up at the valet stand and everyone goes, wow, who is that? No, it's not the Lamborghini. Well, we got Coleman Shelton at center for 1 year for $3 million. The Kansas City Chiefs, they have Creed Humphrey. They just paid him $72 million. The Houston Texans paid a stiff price, but they got Laramie Tunsil at left tackle. We don't have that, and that's one of the issues.
Dave, what are they saying today? What's the mood in Chicago and the overall tea about the future? What's the leash on head coach Matt Eberflus? I mean, I agree with you with Shane Waldron. I think I've seen the second suspect game he's called in 2 weeks, and he's new, so okay, I'm going to give him time. But this is Matt's third year. What's the feeling? What are you feeling about his future?
So our players love Matt Eberflus. Love. I've got a couple friends of mine who are really, really tight with a couple of the players, and then I have 2 players that work on my YouTube channel, do their own shows. And I've asked them, with no mic around, with no camera around, what do you think of Coach? Love this dude. He holds us accountable. He's a really good football coach. So I don't think that there is any thought around the building. Now, if you tell me they finished the season 5-12 with all the hype that this season has begun with, yeah, he'd be in trouble. No question about it. But if he finishes 9-8, which I think is eminently doable, you got one of the easier schedules in the league. Nobody had them beating the Texans, and they had the football late in that game with a chance to win it. So the defense is legit. The special teams are among the best with Torrey Taylor punting and Cairo Santos kicking. But you got to figure your blank and offensive line issues out. You have got
Yeah.
to start running the ball downhill, not around the edge.
And what do you make, Dave? That's a great answer. Actually, I appreciate that. What do you make of DJ's anger at the end of the game last night, throwing down his helmet? Didn't go to Caleb. Just he had a moment. He went medieval.
You talking about when DJ was going up the sideline at the
Yep.
late in the game when
Yep.
they missed him on
DJ
a back
Moore, the wide
shoulder throw?
receiver. Yes.
Yeah.
I think it was just frustration because he and Caleb are super tight.
That's what I
you know,
thought
had
from
Caleb-
Hard Knocks. Yeah.
He had Caleb come speak at his youth camp in the summer. They're super, super tight. But I think he's frustrated. Didn't get the football to him in a situation where he gave him some space on the sidelines to fit it in there. Now, you know, fans are calling my show today saying, well, you know, I know he got hit X number of times, but what about the ones he didn't get hit? Well, you keep getting pounded in the head and knocked down, and you're going to be a little gun shy too.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, nobody's here. Bam, step into the throw. You got to get that ball and get it out. Now, he was the sixth fastest in the NFL this week from snap to ball leaving his hand, 2.59 seconds. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. But it's got to be better, and they've got to be able to establish the run. They did not do a good job at that. Yesterday, he was their leading rusher with 44 yards.
Yeah, I will say, just watching him, obviously, he's still a work in progress, but Caleb Williams has a whole lot of talent. It was impressive. You could see the arm talent. You could see his speed, why people got excited about him. He could turn into somebody very special, but they're going to have to protect him. You don't want to get him all beat up and get gun shy and jittery in the pocket. That would just be a devastating waste of his talent. So hopefully they'll go ahead.
Completely agree with you. So the worst thing would be to have him get an injury, get gun shy, and all of a sudden, same old Bears. Now, I don't think they have prioritized their offensive line enough. I do not. I know they drafted Darnell Wright, number 10 last year. I think he's going to be a really good player at right tackle. They did not do enough in the offseason, going back to $3 million for Coleman Shelton, who the Rams said, "Nah, we're good. You can leave." If they're letting you leave and all you get is 1 year and $3 million, it tells you you're not a very good football player. You're just a very pedestrian guy. Nate Davis, for whatever reason, that dude just doesn't want to play football. He looks lost out there.
Mm-hmm.
He's talented. Tevin Jenkins, he didn't have a good night. Now, again, I know you're going up against Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter, two studs. That's a really good Houston Texans team, and I love your coach. I think DeMeco Ryan is a star. Yeah, I've never seen a franchise that 3 years ago has Jack Easterby at the top of it, and 3 years later, you guys are going to contend to win a Super Bowl. You may not win it yet, but you're a contender. It's amazing what they've done.
You said Easterby. That's a name of which we will never speak again. He's a dirty word in this city. No, we're talking Dave
getting rid
Kaplan.
of him was a great move for you guys.
No,
we're
kidding.
talking Dave Kaplan. He's with ESPN Radio in Chicago. One thing I want to ask you about those Bears, it's still odd for me to see them in those all orange uniforms. How are those
That's
playing in Chicago?
Right. I thought the same thing.
Yeah, people here don't like them. I did. I think they're cool. I actually bought my son an orange jersey because someone had sent me one as a promo to the station. So I have one, but unfortunately it's a Khalil Mack one. He plays for the Chargers now. But my son wanted one, so I got him an orange one. I think they're cool looking. It's a gimmick. It's, you know, something they're not going to wear all the time. But we're still used to the regular blue Chicago Bears uniform or the white.
Okay, so, you know, we've got an old radio dog who's producing our show, and he wants us to ask you if you can believe that it's been 30 years since you appeared in the documentary Hoop Dreams.
Yep.
Oh, my gosh. Seriously?
It's crazy to think how long it's been. I was a college basketball coach in Division I when I was 21 years of age, and I worked 4 years there, and then I jumped to the NBA, and I was there 4 years as a scout, and then some guy called me one day on a Sunday. DePaul, who's horrible now, was the number one team in the country, and this guy called me on a Sunday morning and said, "Hey, your name was given to us. We know you coached. Have you ever done television?" I'd never done anything but watch television, and I said, "Oh, I've done a ton of television." And the next thing you know, I'm talking to you in 2024, and I've done almost 40 years in the industry on the air, radio, and TV. Super cool.
Amazing.
That's a great story.
Good to hear.
That is a great story. I love it, Dave.
All right, Dave Kaplan of ESPN Radio in Chicago. Dave, really appreciate your joining us.
You got to tell Craig Larson he's the man.
He is the man. He's certainly not the woman. At least he didn't identify that way today. But
oh my God, have a great night.
We're going
Dave.
downhill fast. Thank you, Dave.
Coming up next, we're going to get a chance to visit with the great Paul Gallant. He is the lead host of Gallant and George, which broadcasts weekdays here on KFNC. It'll be Paul Gallant up next here on ESPN Radio 97.5 and 92.5.
Football is hard to win in the NFL. I'm happy. Of course, I'm not satisfied. I'll never be satisfied. There's always things that you can point out. We're not going to let one half of football make us put our head in. We're going to stay confident. We're going to stay taking shots. We're going to stay, betting on us. So I definitely, understand, we need to be better. But, like you said, winning is number one. So we won, and now it's time to move on and get better.
Welcome in. That was CJ Stroud, and I loved his comments that while he was delighted with the win, they're never satisfied, and that's what makes him such a great leader. Joining us now is somebody who always wins, but he's never quite satisfied.
And is a great leader.
Well, he's the city's most eligible bachelor, I believe, Paul Gallant. Paul, welcome into the show.
What's going on, guys?
We can't give you a normal introduction. You're Paul Gallant.
I like this.
I like it
this.
too.
I don't know if I'm the most eligible bachelor, but I appreciate the pat on the head.
Well, we're doing what we can.
Just go with it, Paul. We like it over here.
You can find him on a Tinder account somewhere. Gallant. Swipe the right
Okay,
way.
he's getting you in trouble now,
I'm doing
Paul.
what I can, Paul.
I'm going to try and hold him back, but it's not easy.
Carlo wants to talk a little bit Texans and your question, Stephon Diggs.
Yeah,
a little
was that
quiet this
so?
week.
Paul, you were at the game last night, right?
I was at the game. Yeah. I didn't leave until like 3 a.m. or so.
Go. Yeah. I want to hear your take. I was there too. And besides the fact that the open roof was raining penalty flags, good Lord, want to get your take there. I was a little concerned about the Stephon Diggs usage. I wasn't week 1. So talk to me about that.
Well, yeah, if you're playing fantasy football with Houston Texans wide receivers and you thought that Stephon Diggs or Tank Dell were going to be helping you out a lot the first couple of weeks, it's been pretty difficult because Nico Collins has been the one that's been getting the lion's share of the work. The offense hit a wall in the second half. A lot of it had to do with penalties. I felt like they dealt with some issues in pass protection and run blocking as that game wore on. And the Bears have a very good defense, but look, I don't think it's something to be concerned about yet. I know with Stephon Diggs, he has always been a rather demanding player wherever he's been, but I think also they're winning. And I also believe that C.J. Stroud's probably looking at the film and he's going to have seen a couple of moments where he could have gotten Stephon Diggs involved a little bit more.
Well, and I read something that Stephon Diggs had said, what you see of C.J. Stroud, he is a great guy. And behind the scenes, he is hard on us and bring it we love that. And I thought for a veteran to be talking about a second-year quarterback like that, that's mad respect. And so he didn't look frustrated or anything like that, but I think, see what you think about this, Paul. Just having Stephon Diggs out there is the decoy. You can't ignore it, whether he's a target or not.
No, they're a problem. I don't know who you're supposed to ignore. Their tight end, Dalton Schultz, is also pretty good as far as tight ends go. They're loaded at the weapons, and the weapons have just got to be happy if they're not going to be used that often. I think it has been really cool to see Nico Collins taking that step into the top wide receiver in the NFL conversation and take a look at the rapport that he has with Stroud, who, interestingly enough, Stroud was spending a lot of offseason time with Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell this offseason. You would think that would mean that maybe Nico Collins wouldn't get as many looks, but whenever things break down, this has happened 3 times at least in each of the first 2 games. Stroud is going to find Nico Collins somewhere, somehow on the field, and you trust Collins to come down with the football, whether it's with one knee down like he had to
that
help
was
win the game
amazing
against the Colts in week 1, or the one-handed catch that he had last night. It's been really impressive.
And he got his first game ball last night. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
We're talking about Paul Gallant. He's a host on Gallant and George. You can hear them weekdays here on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 from 12 to 3. Okay, the Texans now shift gears to the Vikings. They go to Minnesota, and that Vikings defense shut down the 49ers. They sacked Brock Purdy 6 times. How do you assess this matchup? Surely a much tougher foe than they faced, really in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, Minnesota's one of the surprises of the league thus far because they're doing this without the guy that they drafted in the first round at quarterback, J.J. McCarthy. And I think when you look at Kevin O'Connell, the head coach of the Vikings, on the offensive side of things, he has to be entering at least conversations for coach of the year. If he's able to keep this up with Sam Darnold, a guy who has been tried out with so many different teams. I don't even know where we're at when it comes to the amount of teams that Donald has played for, but you saw him in the locker room afterwards going up against the 49ers, who he had played for not that long ago. Super emotional in there. This is just a very well-coached team. And while you might look at them on paper and say, hey, this is a fraudulent 2-0 team, they've taken care of business the first couple of weeks. They have quite the home field advantage at that stadium that they play in. So I think you mentioned that pass rush and the fact that the Texans the first 2 weeks have allowed 7 sacks. And C.J. Stroud has had to run for his life a little bit more than we'd probably like to see these first couple. Yeah, I think Minnesota's defense is going to be a problem. It's really going to be interesting to see Jonathan Grenard, who last year for the Houston Texans was so good, on the opposite sideline this time around in addition to Blake Cashman. A couple ex-Texans are on that Vikings defense now. They were here with the team last year.
And we'll have to see if Jefferson takes the field or not, because that will obviously be a big factor as well.
Oh, 100%. And look, Justin Jefferson's really good. I think if you're a Texans fan, you got your fingers crossed that quad injury is going to keep him out a little bit of time.
Yeah, no kidding. I hate to be that way, but yeah, let's be real. Can I shift gears with you for a second, Paul, to college football? Because the Texas had a big weekend overall, not only University of Texas, but the Aggies, like going into Florida. Not that Florida is formidable, but I saw this stat at the half: rushing yards. Aggies 197, Gators -18.
Oh,
Wow.
Like, I don't even know that I've ever seen a stat like that. But is Mike Elko looking at a quarterback situation / controversy going forward, because Connor Wegman was scratched, due to a shoulder injury? Redshirt freshman Marshall Reed gets in, and that offense became dynamic. It was 310 yards rushing versus the Gators, back-to-back games with over 300 yards rushing. I mean, it was just such an incredible game. Is there going to be a controversy going forward if Wegman can go?
I mean, look, I saw enough on Saturday, and this was a very painful game for me to watch because, well, I didn't go to Florida. I've always liked Florida.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was watching with some of my Aggie friends too.
Oh,
and
geez.
they were laughing because I was getting so mad at the many things the Gators did poorly. In particular, you've hit rock bottom as a program when a player gets ejected for targeting on a play where his helmet hits another guy, not in the head, but in the butt. That actually happened. Look it up for yourself. I couldn't believe it happened. I was just like, this is who we are now. We're just a laughing stock. We're getting targeting calls on things that you thought were reserved for the butt fumble and Mark Sanchez.
Yeah, no kidding.
But, yeah, look it up. It's hilarious. But to bring it back, I feel like with Colin Klein running the show now offensively for Texas A&M, Wigman just isn't a fit here. And I feel like if that is the way that it looks on the road, even if it is a Florida team that's not as good as they've been in years past, it was so easy for them. Then they got to go with the guy who perhaps understands how to run Klein's offense a little bit better. And remember him at Kansas State and the way that he played. Well, maybe Reese is a better fit than Wigman for that. And, you feel for Wigman, who came here and clearly thought Jimbo Fisher was going to be here for life, as we all did. Sometimes it doesn't work out. I feel like you can't be married to a quarterback just because of where he was ranked as a high school prospect.
Yeah, that's the sad truth. This is a business. College football is big time business. And Paul, not to add salt to the wounds, but when I watched that game and I thought, how bad can this get for Florida?
Oh
when
my God.
The home crowd was booing a drunk driving PSA because it featured Billy Napier. Like, I can't even believe what I'm saying. Wow.
Yeah, it just hasn't been working out there. And I mean, they had Steve Spurrier, they had Urban Meyer, and I mean this was one of the most dominant college football programs, but it's been like 10 years of this, it feels like, post Tim Tebow. I mean, may as well hire Tim Tebow as head coach. Can't be any worse than this.
Bring him back.
Seriously. And I heard that by the end of Saturday evening, Florida boosters had assembled $26 million to buy out Napier. So if he's here by mid-October, I'm going to be surprised.
Yeah, I'll add $1.
Okay.
Yeah, you're in the mix there.
The
We're
big
talking
spender.
to Paul Gallant of KFNC. You hear him 12 to 3 each weekday. So, Paul, looking back one more time at the Texans in their place in the division, they sit with a record of 2-0. No one else has won a game. The team that really surprises me is that the Jaguars are off to such a bad start. I thought with Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson there now as the coach, they would get things together. But they really look like they are struggling. And to lose to the Browns yesterday, and we saw week one, the Browns don't have all their pieces humming and singing and dancing and playing well together. What's your take on the Jaguars, and who scares you in the division for the Texans?
You can be pretty cocky about the AFC South if you're a Texans fan right now. The Jaguars are 1-8 since they beat the Texans last year.
Oh,
and just think about that. They were 8-3 last year. They were 8-3. they had the AFC South
Oh.
locked down, and I mean they lose. If I'm doing my math correct, what was it? Was it 7 of 8 to wrap up the year,
Yes.
or something like that? And then, of course, this year they start off 0-2. I truly don't know what to point at. I know a lot of people are going to point at Trevor Lawrence, and I've never been the biggest Trevor Lawrence guy, but I do think he's talented. I think Doug Peterson's a competent coach. If I'm pointing at anybody, I'm pointing at Trent Baalke, who somehow has
Amen.
a job as the roster constructor for the Jaguars. I don't know how he's still a major personnel guy in the NFL, because his track record screams he should not be in charge of anything at the very least. If I am looking at the AFC South as a Texans fan, the team that concerns me the most is the team that the Texans played in week 1. The Titans, I feel like Brian Callahan, new head coach of the Titans, is just sickened by Will Levis, who does something hilarious.
And do we blame him? Do we blame him? Oh my gosh. Don't get me started.
No, I don't either. I mean, you would think that he would have learned to not do something dumb after one of the worst pick sixes we've ever seen. So I think Tennessee's an afterthought this year. But I really like Shane Steichen as a head coach in Indianapolis. And Anthony Richardson is very raw, and yesterday was a pretty rough one for him against the Packers. But I feel like with Richardson, Steichen can figure out the best possible way to use him on a week-to-week basis and get wins out of that. If they can win last season the way that they did with Gardner Minshew, and props to him, he beat the Ravens yesterday, I feel like he can make it happen with a guy as raw and gifted as Richardson too. So the Colts of all the teams in the AFC South are the one that concerns me most if I'm the Houston Texans.
Yeah, they do strike me as having the best total roster. Obviously, Richardson needs to step up and develop as a quarterback, but they've got a lot of talent on both sides of the ball.
Correct. Their front seven's really good, and their wide receiver core pretty good too. Adonai Mitchell, I like him as a rookie, and they had random guys running for 50 yards.
Oh my gosh. That was unbelievable. I was like, who is that? I've never even heard of this person. That was amazing.
It's been interesting with them the last couple of years. They have a bunch of receivers who sound like they'd be like 1,800 politicians, like Alec Pierce and Chester Arthur. Like, it's just like weird sounding names. You're like, who the heck is this? Oh,
they should have long white wigs.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the only thing missing. Yeah.
Well, I think with Richardson, this is basically his rookie year. And I think, as you saw with him at Florida, it's feast or famine. His raw athleticism is freakish. And you're going to get a game like he played against the Texans, which was amazing, or you're going to get an ugly situation that you had yesterday because he's a gunslinger. So I think Shane Steichen is the guy that can channel that because his talent is off the charts. It's just consistency.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, if there's any quarterback you could play with in a video game, it's Anthony Richardson. He can throw the football a mile, and he's fast, and he can run people over, too. I mean, but the problem is sometimes the video game version of an athlete is nowhere close to what the guy actually is in real life. If he ever gets consistent, he will be a pain in this division.
Oh, for sure.
I guess we're all hoping if he does ever figure it out, it's not going to be in Indianapolis.
One last question before we let you go, Paul. Talk about a quarterback who needs to figure it out. What was your take on Caleb Williams? How did you see his play yesterday?
I thought he showed incredible toughness yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, the Texans pass rush, that's what you paid Danielle Hunter for. That was an impressive effort. I thought in week 1, the Texans defense had some moments where I was a little bit frustrated with them and was wondering, would this be one of the best quarterbacks in the game? I think the defensive effort that they put out there yesterday would have done the same thing to the majority of offenses across the league. Now, you can't do that every single week, but they were great. They were flying all over the football, 7 sacks, 11 quarterback hits, 20 pressures. So to bring it back to Caleb Williams, who escaped a sack on a play where Danielle Hunter had him by the jersey, and he ripped out of the jersey. I thought that at the very least, Williams showed that he has elusiveness and that he also is tough. He keeps on getting back up, and I'm sure that his teammates got some newfound respect for him, seeing the way that he was getting clobbered all night long. Obviously, the wide receivers are going to be frustrated about a couple of those passes that were inaccurate. But look, I'm not going to come out of this performance last night saying that I think Caleb Williams is the chosen one, like so many are saying. But I think he's tough. and I think toughness was a question about him coming out of college. I believe he's a tough quarterback after having watched that last night. Hopefully,
I
he gets some
do.
help from his offensive line going forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you 100%, Paul.
Yeah, he needs a little help. That O-line needs some work. And frankly, I don't know if they've got a great offensive mind on that coaching staff. So there's they're a work in progress there.
No, I think that play calling has been suspect for the first 2 weeks for the Bears, honestly.
Oh, yeah. Waldron, I'm not a fan of. When I was up in Seattle, he was working with the Seahawks. Not to say he's bad or anything like that. It just seems like he's one of those guys that's been around Sean McVay, and everyone assumes that he's going to have all the answers. But I felt as that game wore on and the pre-scripted plays, like the first 15, generally a coach decides before the game even begins, the first 15 plays are going to run. Once it got into the middle of the game, you could tell the Bears were scared to do anything over the middle of the field. Everything was to the sideline. Yeah. It just, and you're right. It felt very uncreative. It felt maybe because of the limitations they have, they didn't think that they could actually do anything. But I think right now, Caleb Williams, not the problem. Got to give him some time. You don't want to Bryce Young him like the Panthers just did to Bryce Young today. But they're going to need another head coach, I think, and probably another offensive coordinator to actually make Caleb Williams look like he could potentially live up to all the potential people believe he has.
I mean, it's hard to give Chicago sympathy for not having a good quarterback and not having a good offense when they continue to hire defensive-minded coaches over and over and over. Hello.
I mean, their last good quarterback was Sid Luckman, and what was that, like 1940s? So,
I'm an old Bob Avellini guy. I don't know if you remember his name, but these go way, way back.
Oh,
yeah.
All right, he is Paul Gallant. You can hear him tomorrow, each weekday, 12 to 3. Paul, thanks you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Anytime, guys. Y'all have a great night.
Yep,
you too. Care. Thanks, Paul.
All right, we'll be right back, and we're going to look at the big upsets in the NFL. A lot of marquee teams fell yesterday, and we will look at that and break those down when we return here on ESPN Radio.
You're listening to The Boss
and the Gloss.
on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5.
Presented by Tony's. Tony's Restaurant, the city's top fine dining experience.
From the Veritex Community Bank Studios, here's David Gow.
And Carla Dawson.
Welcome back. And we promised we'd talk about some of these big upsets yesterday. The 49ers, the Cowboys, the Ravens, and the Lions all losing yesterday.
I mean, they were our stars week one.
They were the
They were
teams about which
the
we
heavy
were
favorites,
raving.
and they were all that they lived up to be week one.
Sports Illustrated had this big piece on how the Lions are actually going to win the Super Bowl this year.
Mm-hmm. Along with Dallas, I'm sure they're going to fight it out for it, right?
Sure, no one in the media is picking the Cowboys to win the Super Bowl.
That's
They
probably
hate the
true.
Cowboys. They're all idiots. There's no way the Cowboys will ever go anywhere. So no one's thinking that. But people did think the Cowboys were going to win that game yesterday over the Saints. Let's talk about that one. The Saints may be a better team than we all envisioned. Derek Carr is lighting it up, and Kubiak did an amazing job coming in and coaching that offense.
Okay, I was going to tell you later that we have to pick our MVP of the week, and my MVP is Clint Kubiak.
Clint Kubiak, I thought you were going to say Derek Carr, but they're symbiotic here.
They are symbiotic
Yes.
because he has been able to unleash David Carr's talent.
Yep.
Because, I won't get into all the conspiracy theory. I know Josh McDaniel wanted Carr out because he wanted his own person in, wouldn't let him. He didn't have schemes going to Devontae Adams. So Carr gets pushed out, goes to New Orleans. Dennis Allen doesn't woo me as a coach, but they bring in Clint Kubiak this year. And the Raiders have put up 91 points in the first 2 weeks.
It's an amazing stat.
And-
I heard Tom Brady say right before the game, okay, they scored, 47 points against the Panthers. And he said, nobody can put up 47 points on another team in the NFL. It's very, very, very hard to do. And then they basically went and did the exact same thing with the Cowboys. Back-to-back weeks to do it is very impressive.
It's very impressive. And I think it was really a good sign, especially for Saints fans or Derek Carr fans, to see that, yeah, sure, against Carolina, you could go ahead and say double digits, not going to be a problem. But Dallas is formidable, as we saw in week one, and their defense especially. And it was such a cool irony was that in Minnesota, so Dallas's new DC, as you know, is Mike Zimmer, brilliant defensive mind. Clint Kubiak was the quarterback coach under Mike Zimmer in Minnesota. So here they are now on opposite sidelines, and the student overtook the master yesterday. I mean, it wasn't even a contest. It was so crazy. And if
The stats were overwhelming. They didn't punt until late in the third quarter, early
Right.
fourth. It was
Right.
an amazing offensive display.
And in their first two games, in the Saints' first two games, their first 15 possessions translated to 15 scores.
Amazing.
15 for 15.
Now they've got a lot of weapons, but still, you can have a lot of weapons.
Alvin
and you
Kamara
don't
had
score
4
like that.
touchdowns yesterday. I mean, it was so crazy. And I think, yeah, you hope you had Alvin Kamara as a fantasy football guy for sure. But I think the first half yesterday, in which New Orleans put up 35 points at Jerry World, I mean, it was in Dallas's home, and there were a lot of Saints fans. That's for sure. With the most points allowed in the first half in Cowboys history.
Well,
Like,
the problem the
that's
Cowboys are going to have to
insane.
solve is, can they ever stop the running offense that comes from that Gary Kubiak, Mike Shanahan tree, that spread run that has been run so effectively? The Cowboys defense has not been able to stop that. This looked a lot to me like that Packers loss in the playoffs,
Yeah.
where they were not able to stop the run. Now, in
They
Mike
don't
Zimmer's-
have a run either. That's the other problem on the other
no, they
side of
didn't
the
run
ball.
the ball well, but they got so far behind. They were down by 22 points early in the third quarter, and then they went all pass. So they never got any run game going at all.
I mean, if you look at Carr's first quarter, just the first quarter alone, he was 4 for 4, 135 yards and 2 touchdowns. And that's the first quarter alone.
But so,
Aye.
but the interesting thing about that Cowboys run defense is they have brought in some beef to try to stop the run, to be less vulnerable to that kind of a running offense. They brought in Linval Joseph. Mazzy Smith has put his weight back on. He was their first round pick over a year ago. And then they brought in some good linebackers. I mean, Eric Kendrick is a very strong run stopper with great instincts. Yet this was the first time the new players in Mike Zimmer's defense had to face that kind of running attack that they fell to in the Packers last year, and they didn't fare any better. I guess one sliver of hope could be that, well, Mike Zimmer hasn't really gotten to coach a lot of those players in real-time games. Most of them did not play in preseason. This is their second game, their first time to actually face that kind of a run game. But this is not new news. This has been a long struggle for the last couple of years. It goes back to the Dan Quinn defense, which was always small and quick and got after the passer.
They were not quick yesterday. They looked like they had cement in their shoes.
And
that
so,
was a strange thing to see.
Yeah, and look, they have more beef on that defensive front, but it didn't seem to make any difference.
What did you make of Dak's play yesterday? I like Dak a lot. And I know you're a long you look at the Cowboys in grave detail. What did you feel about his play yesterday?
Well, we've had this conversation over the years with you as a Raiders fan and me as a Cowboys fan. I always thought Derek Carr was a better quarterback than Dak Prescott. And you have all the talking heads say you got to pay Dak Prescott like he's the top quarterback in the NFL. Pay the man, pay the man, pay the man.
Paid that.
Everybody says that, so they finally have. But Derek Carr has always been the better quarterback in my head. I've said this for many years.
Yeah. And
now he outperformed him on the field, and he's a whole lot less expensive, doesn't take up the salary cap space that Dak Prescott did. So I think if you just compare the two, you've got the highest paid quarterback who did not perform at the same level as now, frankly, a mediocre paid quarterback.
Right.
Somebody who
mid-level.
frankly had been discarded and not that well regarded. And Derek Carr, at least it's only 2 games, but he is playing at a very, very elite level. It reminds me of that one season when he was in MVP consideration. He's
Before
having
he
that
broke
kind of a
his
start
leg.
to this season.
When Oakland was in Oakland.
That's right.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And you know what really struck me too, and I hope this changes and this could just be the situation with the game yesterday, but the Saints are having so much fun. Like I noticed it week 1, and then they carried on week 2. They are actually having fun out there, where obviously Dallas is not having fun. That was a super frustrating game yesterday beyond. And I mean, what do you think of Mike McCarthy? Do you like him being the play caller? Did you feel like he used the weapons well? I mean, I didn't see a whole lot of targets for CD. He was covered well, but he caught that beautiful pass, which led to their only touchdown in really good coverage, and he was able to pull it down.
Well, the problem with the offense, they did move the ball. They went down the field, but 4 times they had to settle for field goals. And coming to the game, actually, what I had been reading and hearing was it was going to be an offensive shootout. I didn't think so. I thought it would be much more defensive. But, of course, the offenses did move the ball well. The Cowboys moved the ball just fine, but they didn't move it in the end zone. They didn't convert.
And a couple turnovers, costly turnovers.
Turnovers and then 4 field goals, and the offense won't look very impressive. But they moved the ball. Look, they've got work to do. It's still early. I resent, there's a little bit of a notion out there that CeeDee Lamb is the only offensive weapon out there. I think that
I don't think that's
a
true.
discredit to Brandon Cooks.
Exactly, who had a great game.
And look, Jake Ferguson was not able to play, and that's a loss. Shoemaker is not Jake Ferguson at this point in Shoemaker's career. Shoemaker taken in the 2nd round last year.
But he had some nice catches yesterday.
He is somebody whom I think they can develop. Their tight end room is actually pretty good, but there's no Jake Ferguson on that group right now. So I think they've got the weapons. Look, their running back, they clearly haven't invested a lot into that position.
No, they don't have a running game, and that's a problem. I mean, it was like Chicago last night here in Houston. They had no running game, and that ended up being an issue because that puts way too much pressure on a quarterback, and it forces you, even a seasoned quarterback like Dak, to make throws when he really shouldn't.
Well,
that kind of thing.
But the Saints came down the field and scored and scored and scored, and so at some point,
at ease,
the Cowboys punted, and they were in their 2-minute drill for most of their game. They just couldn't convert those field goals into touchdowns.
Do you think Zach Martin's past his prime? I mean, I know he went out yesterday with an injury. Do you think he's always been such a stalwart for that O-line? He is getting up there in years.
Yeah, he's 33 or 34 now.
I mean, football years, that's a lot.
No, he may well be in his last year. This is his final year on his contract with the Cowboys. And I think most people believe that the Cowboys, particularly as they have to deal with salary cap considerations, will not be able to give him the kind of contract he's going to deserve. This could be his final year as a Cowboy. They've been planning for it. I mean, they've been certainly investing in the offensive line. They've got those 2 rookies starting in the offensive line, and those rookies still need to grow up. But there's really good potential in both Beebe and Guyton. But they've got work to do, and Zach Martin will be the best of Zach Martin, the guy who has had a Hall of Fame career, is sort of irreplaceable. But they've got T.J. Bass and Brock Hoffman. They've got guys they can fill in there at right guard.
And Guyton did get a couple untimely penalties yesterday too. I mean, every penalty is untimely, but
always
he got a couple of them. Yeah.
So
But that's
Cowboys
youth.
fall to the Saints. Saints looking pretty stout at 2-0. One thing about the Cowboys is they got to face the Ravens next week, and the Ravens.
They're going to be mad.
Well,
they are going to be mad.
Yeah, Ravens 0-2 are going to come out with a great deal of urgency, and then of course all the Ravens are hearing about all week is they haven't run the ball enough. They haven't run the ball enough. They haven't run the ball enough.
It's
They're going to
true.
run the ball next week, and they're going to test that Cowboys run defense. So
Yep.
that's a prime matchup that week. But let's talk about the Ravens. They fell to your Raiders. And
In Baltimore, their home opener.
huge surprise to me.
And they had a huge lead, a 10-point lead in the third quarter.
So what do you think was that turning point? Why couldn't the Ravens finish the deal? What's going on with the Ravens? Why are they sitting here at 0-2? I mean, surely they could have beaten the Chiefs. It was a toe tap away.
Don't get me started on why the Chiefs keep eking this stuff out.
Well,
I think that Baltimore did pretty much all that they could. I think in the Chiefs game, it turned into the Lamar show, which happened. He did really, really well. And then when it got to crunch time, he did what Josh Allen does, takes it all on himself. Sometimes that works. Most of the time it doesn't. It's just too much. But I think, yesterday they were doing great. But I think the fact that they did not use the run game really cost them at the end. And to Las Vegas's credit, I think it was more what Las Vegas did rather than what Baltimore didn't, because Baltimore's got weapons everywhere. They didn't use them all, but
the Raiders rediscovered Devontae Adams. He was electric yesterday.
yes, you're exactly right. I had two keys to that game. Well, actually three. Number one, Max Crosby. He is the best NFL player that is never talked about, bar none. Max Crosby is a beast. Number two, they unleashed Devontae Adams. Finally, they were able to use him and use him well. And the third was Antonio Pierce, first-year head coach for the Raiders. He learned from last week. He learned from his mistake of not calling a conservative game, which he did last week and lost to the Chargers. And it paid off big time. He has Marv Lewis on the sidelines with him, consulting him, because he doesn't know timing and things like this because he's never been a head coach. He did a much better job this week. And I think, that really was a huge key to the game. And, with the Ravens, I would say their issues, the reason they lost it, very porous O-line. That looked terrible. And why the heck aren't you using Derrick Henry? What'd you bring him in here for?
All right, you heard it there. We're going to have to go to a break now, and we're going to look at one more upset when we return. It was Tampa Bay beating Detroit, a big win there for Tampa Bay. And then I want to look at who is the elite in the AFC. That up next here on ESPN Radio 97.5 and 92.5.
This is The Boss
and the Gloss.
on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5.
Presented by Tony's. Tony's Restaurant, the city's top fine dining experience.
From the Veritex Community Bank Studios, here's David Gow.
And Carla Dawson.
Welcome back. And we went to break talking about the upsets in the NFL. I mean, seeing the Ravens and the Cowboys and the 49ers losing and the Lions losing to the Buccaneers. Buccaneers sitting at 2-0, Detroit 1-1. That one surprised me. There's been a lot of hype about the Lions, and there sure seems to be a lot of talent on that roster. That roster includes Aiden Hutchinson, who may be the best pass rusher in the league right now. He had, 4.5 sacks at Baker Mayfield?
Gosh, he was so disruptive. He wouldn't go away.
Yeah. And
Baker Mayfield's going to have PTSD about his face coming at him.
Baker was dancing around a lot in that pocket to try to evade that rush. But even with Hutchinson and his heroics, even with Detroit pulling off a trick play on a fake punt, they had a fake punt on 4th and 12 deep in their own end zone. Detroit could not come away with the win.
Well, I
You're
don't
not
want
a
to be
believer in
mean.
Jared Goff.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I think he's serviceable. I do. I think he's fine. He's
Average
not going to
or
win.
above average, sort of. Just an above average quarterback, but not an elite quarterback. Not a Super Bowl winning
I
quarterback.
don't even, I guess I would say above average slightly.
Yeah.
I think he is good, and he's the system quarterback. Like, remember, we saw with the Rams, as long as he could hear play by play in his helmet what was coming. I don't think he's, I don't think he's not going to win. He's not going to win games for you.
Yep.
He can lose games for you.
Yep.
He's going to be steady. He can do that. He wasn't steady yesterday.
So I have had trouble with this whole Lions hype train, in part because I'm not fully bought into Jared Goff. I'm also not fully bought into Dan Campbell.
And Dan Campbell took all the blame yesterday. He took it all for
and he
his
deserves
calls
some.
and
I mean,
time
look,
management.
if
Yep.
The end of the first half, they left 3 points on the field goal.
That was a
If
cluster.
Mike McCarthy had done with the Cowboys, it would have been the lead story on ESPN show. It's just amazing how that would have been a big blow up. Dan Campbell has that fourth quarter or the second half against the 49ers in the playoffs. I think that they lost that game to the 49ers in the playoffs last year because of coaching.
They lost it. They
Dan
didn't get
Campbell
beat.
had
They
that win.
They beat
And
themselves.
so the jury's still out. He may figure it all out,
I think he will.
but he's just not there yet in my head. He lost the playoffs there, and he lost in 3 points yesterday. He took the loss in his own mind. He took accountability for it, and we shall see. But I'm not ready to buy in on the Lions hype train. If you lose to Tampa Bay 2-0, Tampa Bay has a lot of talent, to be sure. But look, Baker Mayfield, he may be an average to above average quarterback, but he's certainly not elite. And there he sits at 2-0, surprising to me.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, Tampa Bay, they were not perfect, but I tell you what they were. They were gritty. And that's kind of Baker's style anyway. I know you like him much more than me, but he loves playing with a chip on his shoulder, and he does it well. Mike Evans was really, he's such a fantastic receiver. He was a non-factor yesterday. Their run game was sluggish. They only managed 70 yards on the ground. But guess what? That Tampa Bay defense forced Goff into a lot of missed throws. And it got to him very easily. And when we talked about this earlier, and I don't want to keep beating the dead horse, but when you look at Goff, when I saw 307 yards, whoa, but 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions.
And 2 picks.
And guess what? He was 34 of 55. That is a really inefficient line. So while the yardage was a lot, this is why they lost the game. You can't have no touchdowns, but 2 interceptions. That's costly. So I put it on Goff. I'll give Campbell some of it too, but they got to clean that kind of stuff up because this wasn't a Tampa Bay team that was hitting on all cylinders.
All right, Monday Night Football update. The Eagles and the Falcons still 0-0. Eagles had a chance. They put 3 points on the board, but they went for it on 4th and 4 from the Falcon 10, and they failed to convert. So that game 0-0. Falcons flying around that field, a very fired up Falcons team.
Okay, let me ask you this. So Kellen Moore's the new OC, trying to get, Jalen Hurts back to his regular form. He was your guy at the Cowboys. Do you like him? You think he's going to be the guy for Jalen Hurts?
I think he's a decent OC. It's just sort of interesting to me that they view him as the savior there.
I know.
After they've had all those troubles. I mean, look, when he was with the Cowboys, he took a lot of heat. In fact, they let him walk out the door so they could bring in a new
he went to Sean
OC.
McVay, your other buddy.
They were just not that high on Kellen Moore. And, Rex Ryan used to call him the boy wonder in sort of a mocking tone. And now he's the answer. And I'm not sure he will be the answer for the Eagles. Eagles had that horrendous collapse at the end of last season. The offense got off the rails. There was tension.
And they lost 7 straight. Won 7 straight, lost 7 straight.
There
It
was
was terrible.
tension in the locker room. And is Kellen Moore going to fix all that? Well, we shall see. I'm not sure about going for it on 4th and 4.
No, I don't like
with
that.
the
This
Falcon
early
10
in the
with the
game.
chance to take a 3-0 lead. But anyway, we'll have to revisit that one. It'll be a fun
Yep.
game to unfold. It's the Eagles 0 and the Falcons 0. All right, when we come back, we're going to look at who's really elite in the AFC. It was the Chiefs beating the Bengals, 2 elite teams we would have thought, but one's team sits at 2-0, the other at 0-2. Also,
But
I
it
want to
came
ask,
at a cost for Kansas City.
well, that's true.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. That will be up next year. And we will be also look at what you think of Taylor Swift's outfit yesterday. She looked pretty good there in Kansas City. All right, all that up next. You're listening to ESPN Radio 97.5 and 92.5. Now, I do want to mention, if you want to go and have an amazing dining experience, you need to make your reservation today at Tony's. Tony's is located at 3755 Richmond Avenue. It's there in Greenway Plaza. And I'm telling you, the black summer truffles, the branzino, the 55-day dry-aged ribeye, the pasta dishes, you cannot go wrong. They're exquisite menu selections. I strongly encourage you, go and make your reservation today at Tony's, 713-622-6778, and you'll be so glad you did. We'll be right up next here on ESPN Radio.
You're listening to The Boss
And the Gloss.
on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5.
Presented by Tony's. Tony's Restaurant, the city's top fine dining experience.
From the Veritex Community Bank Studios, here's David Gow.
And Carla Dawson.
Welcome back. And we are sitting here with the Chiefs at 2-0 and the Bengals at 0-2. Chiefs squeaked out a victory over the Bengals 26-25. And of course, the Chiefs had that toe tap victory last week over the Ravens. Gosh, these close games by the Chiefs, the kind of games they're winning, it reminds me of the Patriots when they were in the midst of their dynasty. They would always win the close games.
Somehow the NFL has got this set up beautifully. I mean, let's be real. The Chiefs know how to win, even when they don't have a great game. I mean, Patrick Mahomes did not have a good game. He had like 156 yards and it wasn't pretty. They just know how to win.
Well, and they've got Patrick Mahomes who can convert on a 4th and 16. I mean, it was a 4th and 16, but his ability to run around, buy time, and throw it downfield led to the pass interference call that enabled the win. So yes, it's talent, but when you've got a winning culture and a habit of winning, I think you find ways of winning even when you seem to be in the jaws of defeat.
Yes. And also, their quarterback didn't dye his hair in the offseason. As we talked about, every girl knows it's a cardinal sin to do something drastic to your appearance before you start something new.
Oh, come on, Joe.
I'm
He's
serious.
Joe Cool. He can do anything he wants.
Well,
right?
how's it working for him?
Well,
He
0-2
did do
for
what
the
he
Bengals.
wanted. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Oh, boy.
and look,
That's
the
a
Bengals,
tough loss
the
for
Bengals
them,
had
too.
some chances to.
They will regret that.
Yeah, they could have pulled that lead away. They missed a field goal. Lots of things happened there. They'll get it right. They're 0-2. When we talk about the elite teams in the AFC, I think the Bengals are still right there. Of course, you have to include the Chiefs that are defending champs. They're going for a three-peat. I think the Texans are now in that landscape. I think the Bills, look, they're 2-0, and they've got Josh Allen leading the charge. But it's about a 4 or 5 team universe there in the elite of the AFC.
What I think the Bengals are going to have a struggle with is not only Joe Burrow's Billy Idol hair, but also the Jamar Chase situation. While he said, I wasn't treated well, I'm letting this thing go. Are you really letting it go? Because you got a 15-yard unsportsmanlike contact last night for yelling at a ref.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of frustration with him. And I'm not saying right or wrong, but that's not going to go away. He's saying the right thing.
Jamar Chase
Oh, yeah,
to be
they do.
right. I mean, he is such a vital part of that offense and what Joe Burrow
Amen.
wants to do.
Yep. They brought him there because of Joe Burrow. So, they've got to get this figured out with him. That's got to happen in-house.
Okay, the biggest, most notable fan at the game, of course, Taylor Swift.
Lordy.
What do you think of her outfit? I mean, she had that one piece, sort of a long KC Chiefs shirt. What do you think?
I'm going back to the karma and the girl thing. Kelsey did not have his best game. She should not wear that again.
Oh, no.
Bad idea. You got to go with this. Sports is all about superstition.
There's no Kardashian curse here, is there? Kardashian curse?
No, I don't think so. Well, no, because I've won a Super Bowl with her.
Well, they keep
around.
winning with her. Yes, it's okay.
But yeah, I think that outfit wasn't it wasn't his best game.
All right, fair enough. All right, before we have to finish today, I wanted to get back to Tua Tagovailoa because it is tragic what's happening here. This is a guy who just a year ago, we were panicked watching him down on the field in pain with involuntary movements with damage to his head.
The fencing position is what they call it. When your fingers are funky and it's awful.
It was spooky to see.
2 seasons ago. Last season, he was good.
That's true. Okay. 2 seasons ago, but he continues to get hit. He suffered the concussion. And now I think you have to revisit the question, should Tua return to football or should he retire with what remains of his brain intact?
He has a wife and 2 adorable young children. And, I've saw all of it. So he has a reported 3 concussions, but we know it's more than that.
Yes.
And, even going back, he has had actually 4 in the last 6 years, because do you remember the one at Alabama where he got sacked? He dislocated his hip. He broke his nose. He got a concussion. It was terrible, like terrible. So I'm confused by this guy. Like, I think what is so great about him is that he is he seems like a really good guy, character guy. Everyone seems to like him. The locker room loves him. Mike McDaniel loves him. He is so competitive that he can't get out of his own way. And I saw an interview with Nick Saban on the Pat McAfee show the day after Thursday Night Football when he once again was in that fencing position after an unnecessary, it's not a hit. He went into, ironically, the chest of DeMar Hamlin.
I know how ironic that is. DeMar Hamlin, of course, basically died on the field a year ago. And then he was the one who delivered the hit that could put Tua out of football.
Absolutely. And actually, he cradled Tua is what happened. He tried
Hamlin's
to
not
back
playing
up.
dirty there at
No.
all. Not by any means.
And Tua led with his head when he had already gotten the first down. You know, it was towards the end zone. It was like a 4th and 4 or whatever it was.
Slide, protect yourself.
Slide. He doesn't. And so it was awful. When I saw the fencing position, I just said, oh my God, this cannot be happening again. Sure enough, it did. And I saw Saban the next morning. And, you know, obviously Tua played for him at Alabama. And Nick Saban was effusive about what a good guy he is and just what a competitor and what a hard worker. But he said the one thing he does not know how to do is give up on a play.
Mm.
And that was 6 years ago in college.
Yeah.
We're still talking about this.
Yeah.
And the Dolphins just signed him to a over $200 million deal with 167 guaranteed to a guy who doesn't know how to give up on a play. That's not heroics. That's not competitive heroics. This is someone's life. We're talking CTE. We're talking Parkinson's. We're talking, the NFL made a rule because of what happened to Tua. And I don't even know what to say. And then you go to Mike McDaniel, head coach of the Miami Dolphins, clearly loves Tua, will not place him on the IR.
Mm.
You think he's going to be okay in 4 weeks to take whether he retires or keeps on going? You think he's going to be okay in 4 weeks? I don't know what to say, but David, I will say, I'm a woman. I've never played the game of football. You are a father of 4 sons. And you played yourself. What do you do? What if this is your son? What do you tell him?
If it were my son, I would encourage him to retire. But I'll tell you what, this game is so special. It is so hard for people to walk away from it. The passion, the energy, the teamwork, the camaraderie, it is so hard to walk away. But this is a case where when we're talking brain injuries, he needs to walk away. If he were to ask me, now it's his own life, he'll make his own decisions. But that is really sad to see someone who has been so committed to the game and poured himself into the game and is, as you've said, loved by his teammates, a quality man on the field and off the field. But he's got a long life to live, and he should be the quarterback of his family, to use Mike McDaniel's words.
You know, I love that. And what if this was you? What if you were Tua, David? Like, for your sons, I totally get it. You know what that's like. Like, how do you feel? What do you do? Just because you've had that experience.
Well,
honestly.
I just know that you've got to open up the player's eyes to life beyond football. There is just so much more to come. And Tua has a lovely family and can live into that. And that's where he needs to focus his own life endeavors and think beyond the game, because there is more to life than this game. And by the way, the game's going to be over for him in 5 to 7 years anyway, even if he gets to continue to play. So, yeah, he's got to think about the next step in life.
And money's not going to be an issue. And, I worry about his dad. His dad beat him with a belt when he threw interceptions in high school. I can't imagine he's going to be okay if he wants to retire. Yikes.
Fair enough. All right. Well, we will see what happens with Tua and the Dolphins. But it's been great to be with you tonight and great to see the Texans at 2-0. You have been listening to The Boss and the Gloss here on ESPN Radio 97.5 and 92.5.